Hey everybody, Glenn from Third Millennium here. Wanted to take a few minutes today to talk about a little bit of loudspeaker design theory. We get questions from some of our customers, why did we do one thing or another with the speakers, and thought we'd take just a couple minutes to answer that. If you're not the type that's really interested in theory, this probably isn't the video you want to watch, so take a look at one of our others for installation. But if you actually did have a couple of questions about why we did what we did with the design and the development of these speakers, you might find this interesting. Our first product was the Headrest speakers that we developed for the Miata, and that was a little bit because of the fact that there really wasn't a good replacement that was available out there. The idea of the boxes and the seats, Mazda actually started that with the RX7 prior to the Miatas. They did that with the RX7 convertibles. It was a similar setup, although it was a clamshell two-sided box, but they did the basic same thing. They took a very small, inexpensive speaker and put it in there, and Panasonic was the original supplier in these, but they've used different companies over the years. This one, capacitor on it is 10 microfarad at 8 ohms, so this was crossing over at about 2,000 cycles. The way that Mazda has always approached these additional speakers in the car, whether it's the wind blocker in the second generation or even the rear speakers third generation and the headrest speakers first generation, they've always treated these just as tweeters, and really very little mid-range and low end. There's a problem with that acoustically, at least in our opinion. Having a tweeter mounted 3 inches from your head isn't a very pleasant experience. So really we had a motivation to come up with something a little bit better. So what we were looking for was a true mid-range that would have extension well down into the hundreds of cycles as opposed to 2K. And in that process we developed the Millennium 5s. Now the Millennium 5s, you can see a couple of differences right away in these speakers. One, here where they used the paper cone, foam surround, and that very small magnet, we actually used a butyl rubber surround. That, and also we have a little bit more travel that's available in here for the voice coil, allowing a greater extension of the cone. This is what is important in producing low end, and allows the frequency response of the Millennium 5s to get down all the way to about 200 cycles. At 200 hertz, we're covering pretty much all vocals, most instrumentation, and the high end on these is pretty good as well. But when you look at the response curves of these speakers, you'll notice that it's a nice flat response, which is why these have a warm characteristic. The originals, even when they did work, functioning basically as a tweeter, really had a peaked response. This is the same. The second generation Miatas, the NBs, whether it was the Bose or the regular setup, very hot, high end, very peaked. That was, again, the design criteria that they made. Third generation with a little, either the tweeters in the doors on the stock NCs or the small Bose 2-inch speakers. Again, they function really as a tweeter only, and that really is it's a particular style. We've seen that in Japanese speakers over the years. I would say that's consistent with Japanese speaker philosophy. Not what we find personally to be that pleasant. We really do like a warmer and a more natural sound. So we designed these extended low frequency. They were designed to work in this sealed box. That's actually important for damping of the cone motion and allowing the low frequency. It's one of the reasons why just sticking loose speakers into the headrests isn't going to sound that good, because the cones are basically going to be undamped because there is no enclosure. which means they're operating. If you've ever, you can try this if you ever get one of these out, hook up the wires to any of the speakers and just listen to it just sitting loose out in the air, and you'll find that it's pretty unpleasant. And then as you drop it into the enclosure where it's properly damped, you'll notice suddenly a great increase in mid-range and lower end response. That's just really what the motivation is for having a box. What Mazda did is they just made a choice to pretty much have an upper mid-range or just a tweeter out of it. So the Millennium 5's butyl rubber surround is there to allow a large excursion of this cone for lower frequencies. The other thing that we did, these originals, was a paper cone. Here we used a paper, but the paper has under pressure been fused with a polymer that actually makes it more rigid, and that actually helps in terms of the ability of the cone to act as a piston and not to actually ripple as you have it trying to produce different frequencies at the same time. So stiffer cones help. It does add mass, and adding mass to a speaker does tend to, in general, drop the efficiency a little bit. But the trade-off is, again, especially for headrest speakers that are mounted a couple inches from your head, you don't actually need that much power. It's almost like having headphones. The door speakers should be your primary. And that was the design of this. We wanted to come up with a good mid-range that we could have in the headrests and then have the doors be the primary sound source. And that's actually what we recommend to people, is that for the balance of the audio in the Miata, you put on some good quality audio, like a CD or something, and not a FM broadcast. Put on some good quality audio, get the doors primary, set your balance up, bass, treble, fade to the headrest speakers until these just become a little bit louder than the doors, then go back to the doors. That's actually a good balance. You still get a normal stereo image that way, but it does help to deal with the wind noise and the road noise that you actually get in a convertible. We also have slightly larger magnets on these, which are just to help with the power handling capability. The current version of these is capable of 20 watts, and crossovers on these 150 microfarad capacitors, crossing these over to roll off up at around 200 cycles or so. It actually is we still use a stamped steel basket, just like the original used. A lot of this was cost consideration. We sell these for $17.50 a piece to try to keep the cost reasonable. There's no real reason to be looking at a more expensive die cast. You could even do plastic for these, which is like the third generation Miata. All those small Bose speakers are just plastic baskets. We do still like the steel, and it still functions well for us, so we use the stamped steel for these. We also, just as a note, we've put on the same terminal arrangement as the originals, so that the existing wiring harness connects directly to the Millennium 5, so they're just a direct plug-in. And because they do fit the original boxes, nothing needs to be changed or modified in the vehicle. If you have a Miata that does not have the original boxes in it any longer, we have manufactured these boxes ourselves, and they are an exact swap out fit for the factory boxes. They'll accept the factory speakers or our own speakers, and they fit in the seats perfectly. So those are available on our website. I've got a link below for that. So we make a complete retrofit kit, or we just have the speakers that can go into the existing boxes if you have them in your Miata. So anyway, hope this was interesting for you guys. A little bit of why we designed the way we did for these speakers. Hope you do get a chance to try them out if you got a Miata. It does help certainly with the road noise. And coupled with our door speakers, M600, 800s, that really do have a lot of low end, it actually gives you pretty nice audio, even if you have the old stock radio still in your Miata. But anyway, thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give us a like, subscribe, and visit our website too. You can leave comments there. You can leave some below. We'd be glad to respond to you if you have any questions. Thanks very much.